Miss Venise Berry.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. This is probably more of a thrill for me than it is for you, because this is a story that I've wanted to tell for a long time, and I really think that it's going to be an important story for us, for women in general, but for black women in particular, because I really tried to approach this subject from a different perspective. Whenever you see weight issues in the media, it's usually either funny, a comedy, you're laughing at them, or it's of course negative. And so what I wanted to do was really show a whole different perspective about weight. So what I want to do in this presentation, I've been doing a presentation that's a little bit different than a typical book reading. There are some really major issues in the text that I think we need to address in society. And so what I've done is I've put together like a 25-minute presentation that looks at 6 or 7 of the major myths that you'll find in the book in some way or another. And then I've tied those or interwoven various journal entries from Serpentine as they relate to those myths. And so it'll give you a flavor of Serpentine's experiences in the book, as well as some real, what I think, significant information concerning issues we need to address in society concerning weight. One of the first myths and one of the first issues that I think we really need to look at is just the range of attitudes and views concerning weight issues in this society, where there are some people who are repulsed by folks who have weight issues. And the problem with repulsion is that there is this attitude that anything these people can do to become part of the norm is acceptable, including cutting themselves up, stapling themselves, drugs that cause heart problems. Anything that you can do is acceptable because you're so out of the norm and you are considered repulsive. The next level, it's a little higher up but still problematic, of course, is pity, where you have a segment of society that, of course, pities people with weight issues, sees them as, well, they're sick, they have a problem. And they also feel, to some extent, that, because they're sick, they should be protected, they should be tolerated. There are things that we should do in relation to people with weight issues. The next level up would be acceptance. And these are basically people that feel that those who are dealing with weight issues should be accommodated in society. And they still don't see them as part of the norm, though. They're still abnormal, but it's a more tolerant, a more applicable view of people. And so the argument is made that the climate has to be changed to impact some of the unfairness that goes on in conjunction with weight issues. And finally, appreciation, which is, of course, the highest level, where we have some people who have truly learned to value others, regardless of weight, irregardless of weight, and they're willing to confront insensitive attitudes and actions, and they recognize the need to change personal biases toward weight issues. How the book is set up is that at the beginning of each chapter, I've pulled out what I thought were some of the major journal entries that I really liked and I really thought were important. So this one is called Fat Jokes, and I tried to look at the range of attitudes about weight issues through jokes, through a selection of jokes. This is Serpentine's voice. I remember many of the fat jokes I've heard over the years. I love to laugh, but it's hard to laugh at yourself. If you're thin, you're in. If you're fat, get back. Your mama is so fat, Richard Simmons wouldn't deal her a meal. 2 fat people are making love. You get on top. No, I'm tired, you get on top. I got on top last time. Well, I'm not getting on top. Forget it then. Let's go get something to eat. You can laugh. They're jokes. Your mama's so fat, she tripped over 4th Avenue and landed on 12th. How do you make love to a fat woman? Roll her in flour and find the wet spot. A fat lady stepped on a pay scale and put in a quarter. The scale read, "To be continued, another quarter, please." One of the first fat jokes that I remember I heard when I was 14 years old. A lot of people thought it was funny and they laughed, but I didn't. I couldn't, because it was about me. The second myth that I want to talk about briefly is the myth of overeating that the book deals with to some extent in a variety of different ways. It's real interesting to me that wellness is really about balance. And there's this assumption that everybody who has a weight issue overeats. That we eat half gallons of ice cream every night, dozens of donuts and cookies and candies and cakes all the time, everything, and we eat all the time, of course. And that is not necessarily the case. That's a myth. The myth of overeating is a very serious problem that we need to address in this society. Theoretically, if you think about it, you can eat anything you want to eat, but you have to move in relation to what you eat. And that's the problem. It's not that many weight people with weight issues overeat. It's that they don't move enough to balance what they eat. And we know that. We know a lot of times we eat those big meals and then we sit on that couch and we watch that TV, or we go crawl up in that bed. So if you look at it from a different perspective, if you look at it from a balanced perspective, and we start looking at wellness instead of weight, it really is interesting to think about the fact that overeating for most people is really a myth. I know for a fact that I don't overeat. I know for a fact that it's about my movement. It's the fact that I don't move the way I need to move in order to balance out what I eat. So what we have to do is really begin to think about it from a different perspective. You know, you can have that piece of peach cobbler and ice cream, but you just may have to walk around the block 5 times. You know, and that's a very different attitude than dieting and saying, oh, I can't have that, or I can't do that. So it's really important to think about it, I think, a little bit differently. One of the things, the journal entry that Serpentine, that loosely ties to this, that I pulled from Serpentine's journal, is a journal entry called Perfection. There's really no such thing as perfection, only the illusion of it. I realize that I've spent a great deal of my life creating that illusion. Some would say my education, my career, even my life in general have been close to perfect. But underneath the illusion, there have always been issues like self-esteem, love, stress, and of course weight. Today, when I asked myself the same question for the umpteenth time, I really wasn't expecting an answer. Why have I been able to do everything in life I've wanted to do except control my weight? When the answer came, I was shocked because it was so simple. I don't really care about losing this weight. Everything else I've ever cared about in my life, I've done it. What I care about is how society treats me differently because I'm not a size 6 or a size 8. What I care about is how I've been shamed, embarrassed, forced, hustled, guilted, tricked, pushed, bullied, and even frightened into trying to be who society wants me to be. Whenever I've lost weight in the past, I didn't lose it for me, I lost it for society. I lost it to fit in, to be called cute or pretty. I've even lost it to catch a man. Another myth that we deal with in this society that I think we need to address, and I see it happening a little bit, is the myth of exercise. You know, exercise is movement. And you guys, everybody remembers that old saying, no pain, no gain. And we know that's a myth now. We know that it's not about how hard you exercise. We know it's about how consistently you exercise. And it's real important that we begin to understand that. Research is now showing us that walking is just as effective and just as powerful and just as important to wellness as jogging or power walking or swimming or anything else. And so it's really interesting to begin to think about the fact that, you know, there are these myths in relation to exercise, that you need to do this or you need to do that and it needs to be more difficult. Remember those horrifying sit-ups they used to make us do? I used to hate those with a passion, and now we find out that not only are they bad for your back, they really don't even do what they're supposed to do. The crunches are much more effective and they're better on your structure, on your back. So it's real interesting to look at how that myth hopefully is dying out. One of the things that Serpentine has to do is she has to find an exercise. She has to find a movement that she likes and that she enjoys and that she can continue, and she does. She begins to take an aqua aerobics class, and this journal entry is called Aqua Aerobics. I am an aqua aerobics goddess. It's the most miraculous feeling to be in the water again. The weight is literally gone and your body moves with fluidity. You feel light and energized. You can bend, stretch, twist, and jump like never before. I've forgotten how much I loved to swim as a child. I stopped going swimming because when I became a teenager, I needed to look good for the boys. And of course, the water would mess up my hair. And then there was the issue of putting on a swimming suit in public once I gained the weight. It's crazy when you don't want to swim because people will see your body, but you need to swim to get and keep your body in shape. It's kind of like not wearing a seatbelt because it'll wrinkle your clothes, but if you get in an accident, wrinkled clothes is the least of your worries. Another myth that the book addresses is the myth of beauty, and we know this myth very well in this society, particularly in America. And I think this myth is a key issue, especially for black women in this country, because everywhere we look, we're being told that we're not the ideal, we're not the norm, we're not beautiful. Most of us don't look like the European model of beauty. We're not small enough, our hair's not straight enough, our skin's not light enough. And you know, it's really interesting when you start looking at the myths of beauty. Like, for instance, there are myths that came out of slavery that suggest that ugliness is actually based on how closely an African American looks like his or her ancestors. The wider noses, the big lips, the kinkier hair, the darker skin. That's actually a myth that comes out of slavery that's tied to not looking good, to actually being considered ugly. The journal entry that ties to beauty that I want to read you from Serpentine's journal is called Just Say Thank You. I accepted a compliment for the first time today, and it was an invigorating experience. A woman at work told me that she envied my natural beauty. I was about to respond, but my fire took control. It said, "Don't sabotage it." I laughed because that was exactly what I was about to do. I was going to say, most people have their own special beauty. Or maybe I would have flat out denied it and said something like, "You got to be kidding with this luggage I got under my eyes today." But instead, I followed my fire and I absorbed all of that positivity into my soul. I simply said thank you. I too have a natural beauty. My mother, my sister, and especially my Aunt Regina were all so blessed. We all have smooth brown skin and enticing smiles with curvy bodies of various sizes. We could easily cut 10 years off our ages and get away with it. I felt empowered like never before at that moment because I just said thank you. There's also the myth of sameness in this society that I think we need to address. Even though we all know that we're not the same, we still buy into these attitudes and ideas that we should look a certain way and we should act a certain way and we should be a certain way. And we know for a fact people aren't the same. We know biologically women and men are different. We know that women are designed to assume the primary responsibility for the care and nurturing of children, and as a result, what happens? We have more fat tissue, it's harder to lose weight, it's easier to gain weight. We have all these other complications that tie into the fact that we are women. Serpentine begins to realize some of these issues, and she writes a journal entry that deals with gender roles. And this journal entry is called Beautiful Babies. Babies are so wonderful. They come into the world with no baggage, naive and happy. Then society starts to work on their tiny little mental psyches. Little girls should cook and clean. Little boys should wrestle and fight. Little girls should be sensitive, helpful, and quiet. Little boys should be macho, cool, and no matter what, no crime. Things are changing slowly. Today, some men are wearing 2 earrings, and some women have landed top management positions. But for all the progress that we've made in this society, the old myths remain powerful. I thought I was dealing with this kind of bullshit in the best possible way. I would sweep it to the side and keep on moving. I wouldn't even stop to get my hands smelly. But when my niece Micah was born, I realized that sweeping it to the side wasn't the answer. Sweeping it to the side only meant that it would still be there for her to step in when she gets older. I realized that I have to remove the bullshit. I have to get rid of it completely. So now, I carry a shovel everywhere I go. In addition to female and male differences, we know for a fact that there are dominant racial differences that we need to deal with when it comes to the issue of weight in this society. Many of the average weight charts are problematic for black women because they're based on statistics that are not developed for us. They're based on statistics that are developed for European female structures. Experts actually say that you have to add a minimum of 10 pounds to those weight charts when you're looking at the difference between African American and European women. We also come from different backgrounds. During slavery, fat pork and cornbread were 2 of the most nourishing foods a slave could eat. So their bodies were forced to adapt to that kind of substance. And of course, we are the genetic evolution of that adaptation. It's interesting that in East Africa, there's a tribe called the Banyankole people, and the king will select a woman who he wants to be his wife, and the family will keep her for about 6 months to a year and feed her until she's extremely heavy. And it's only then that she's considered beautiful enough or worthy to become his wife. I don't want to suggest that we should accept weight and overlook health problems, and I know that health problems sometimes come with weight. But it's real interesting when you begin to look at what research is telling us now in relation to movement and wellness and weight. You don't have to be, a lot of people are not unhealthy and heavy. Okay, that's not the case. That's the assumption, but it's not necessarily the case. And the unfortunate thing is that when we buy into these kinds of myths of sameness, that everybody's supposed to look the same and be the same size and act the same way and eat the same things, what we ultimately do is teach our 8 and 12 and 16-year-old young, beautiful, healthy black girls to be ashamed of their bodies, to hate their bodies, and to even fear their bodies. The next journal entry deals with a fear, Serpentine's fear of her body. And this journal entry is called Darkness. A walk in the dark was comforting tonight. It's hard to see the rolls of fat in the dark. I feel safe and acceptable in the dark. The darkness always reminds me of the first time I made love to Carlin. As he gently felt his way across my full torso, I was worried. Sometimes the imagination can be worse than reality. Soft honey-colored fingers slid down my stomach and I cringed. I held my breath, hoping he wouldn't jump up and run for the door, hoping that he wasn't just out to get a quick piece and dump me, hoping he could see beyond the surface and recognize the wonderful person I was inside. I slowly let the breath go as his hands continued past my belly button and down to my legs. With no hesitation, he reached upward and caressed the sweetness that rested between my shivering thighs. Carlin moved through the darkness like water moves through a tube, molding his strong, powerful body next to mine. When he lifted himself up and shifted his chest down against my waiting breast, I thank God for Carlin that night. When looking at the myth of dieting, we know that that's a very major problem in this society. And you know, the sad thing is we all buy into it, and we all know that it's a trap. We know it's the yo-yo trap, and we still buy into this dieting thing. You know, there was a study at Vassar University several years ago, and it's the one thing that really opened my eyes and made me decide that's it, no more diets. What the doctors did was they took a group of rats, and they put them on these different high-fat and low-fat diets for them to gain weight and lose weight. And the results to me were just startling. First, they brought them up. They had them at a normal level. They brought them up to a level of where they considered obesity. And then they brought them back down again. The first time they brought them up, it took about 40 days for them to become obese. Then they brought them down, and it took about 21 days to bring them down. They brought them back up again, it only took about 35 days. They brought them back down again, it only took 14 days. 14 days for them to regain that weight again. It went from 45 to 35 to 14 days that third time. That weight shot back up. And we all know that happens. A lot of us do. I know I do. You know, you lose it and boom, it's back, and it's back quicker than how long it took you to lose it. It also took longer for them to lose it the second and third time. It took more than double each time for them to lose that same weight, doing the exact same thing they did the first time, eating the same food at the same time in the same way. And when you start looking at that, what we do is we begin to understand that all we're doing is screwing up our metabolism. You know, what we've done, basically my metabolism is gone. I just can't even, I don't know if there's any hope for me, but I can try to help my daughter so that she doesn't buy into that yo-yo trap, so that her metabolism doesn't end up being in the same situation that I am. But anyway, I think it's really important that we understand that diets don't work, and we got to find another way. We've got to find another way, because that just doesn't work. There's a journal entry from Serpentine that ties into this, and it's called the Yo-Yo Blues. And she was feeling kind of down and out and depressed when she wrote this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get you guys involved in this presentation. I want you to clap for me, and I'm going to, just slowly though, okay? I'm going to try to sing. I got me this fat jean that won't leave me alone. My waist it done left me, it's just up and gone. I exercise and try to eat right, but I tell you it ain't fair. If people bought fat at a penny a pound, I'd be a millionaire. I got the blues, the low down yo-yo blues. I got the blues, the low down yo-yo blues. Thank you. That's enough. There's also the myth of control. You know, this whole thing that we don't have control. We do have control. We're just trying to control the wrong things. And that's the interesting thing for me. What I've been doing is reading a lot of stuff about the emotional ties to weight, the emotional ties to self-esteem. And you know, it's really interesting when you start to understand that we are what we believe. The self is learned. It's not inherited. It's shaped and developed by our knowledge and our experience in this society. And when you begin to understand that, you begin to understand that you do have control. You can control the kinds of information and the kinds of attitudes and ideas you allow into your mind and into your space. Serpentine kind of begins to understand this in the book. And as a result, she writes a journal entry called Shopping. You know, shopping is shopping. It doesn't matter if you're shopping for a new dress or a new man. The strategies are just about the same. For example, some women are bargain hunters. They want something for nothing, and nothing is usually what they get. The greener grass gambler can find exactly what she wants at her first stop, whether it's a new pair of shoes or a new man. But she can't bring herself to commit until she's checked around to make sure there's nothing better out there. Then there's the loyal label lover. In her search for perfection, she's only interested in the surface. The man's title is much more important than his heart. The passive purchaser is a pushover for any smooth-talking salesman or man that comes along. If he says the right thing at the right time, she'll follow him anywhere. And then, of course, we all know the window shopper. This is the woman that most men would call a tease or a flirt. She enjoys the interaction and attention, but she's not interested in a permanent situation. The second-hand hustler can always find treasure in somebody else's trash. She likes married or already committed men. And then finally, we also have the choosy changer. This is the woman who gets something new only to change it. It could be the buttons on that new dress that just don't look quite right. Or, you know, that man I met yesterday, he would really be a good catch if he was in a different line of work. I figure if we understand our shopping strategies better, we might be able to actually get what we want, or at least have a clearer idea of what we're getting and why. The final myth that I want to talk about in my presentation is the myth of Superwoman and her power. And Superwoman is a myth. It's really fascinating to me how many of us are trying to play Superwoman, killing ourselves. And the bottom line is it's a myth. She doesn't exist. It's impossible to be her, but yet we keep trying. What I'd like to do in this section is just simply give you 5 actions that you can begin to do today. 5 little things, just little bitty things. And like I said, it's not like you're going to be able to change everything overnight, but just little things that I'm working on. This was my New Year's resolution. I'm going to work on these 5 little things so that I can begin to get Superwoman out of my system. Because she's killing me. The first one is to identify the stressors in your life, the things that cause you turmoil, the things that bring drama and concern and problems into your life. Identify them and begin to try and eliminate them. Now, some things it may take longer than others, but I'm sure if we get creative, we can get that stress out of our lives. The second is to know our limits and respect them. Many of us know our limits. We know what we can do and can't do, but we ignore them. And we say, okay, well, I'll just give this a try. Or, okay, I'll try to do this. Or you just continue to accept things and you know you can't do it. You know you're over your limit. So I decided that this year I'm going to know my limit and I'm going to respect my limit. We need to identify and prioritize our responsibilities. Some of you out there may be just like me, taking on other people's stuff. constantly doing somebody else's thing. Instead of focusing on what is my responsibility, what do I need to do? You know, that's your thing and I'm gonna leave that to you, and if it don't get done, I'm sorry, it just don't get done. But I have to do what I'm gonna do for me. And that's one of my goals for this year. The fourth is to set aside personal time for myself every single day. Everything else is not going to be more important than me this year. Every day I'm going to set maybe 5 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, maybe 3 hours. But I'm going to set aside some time specifically for me every day. And finally, we've got to learn to say no. I'm sorry, I can't do it, no. And this is my hardest one, so this is going to be my real trial and tribulation this year. I'm going to learn how to say no more often. The journal entry that ties to this idea, this myth of Superwoman, is called Superwoman Sucks. I hate to make feminists mad, but I think women got a messed up deal. Since we've been liberated, not only are we expected to work just like a man, if not harder, but then we're supposed to come home, wash, cook, clean, take care of kids, plus knock boots. What's even crazier is that many of us are brainwashed and we're actually trying to stuff ourselves into this impossible mold. We, women, especially black women, are sick and dying in large numbers. High blood pressure, diabetes, stress, AIDS, heart attacks, and strokes are rampant. But we still keep trying to play Superwoman. It's not fair that we have to bring home the bacon, fry it up in the pan, eat very little of it, and of course still let him think he's the man. In conclusion, what I'm hoping readers get out of All of Me, A Voluptuous Tale, is that the first step to wellness is not necessarily that we have to change our bodies. The first step to wellness, in my opinion, is that we have to change our minds. We have to readjust our attitudes and stop accepting the labels and the stereotypes. And hopefully this book will inspire you to do some of that, to at least think about it from a different perspective. I believe that All of Me, A Voluptuous Tale is about a very important topic in today's society. It's about love. I know you thought I was going to say weight, but the answer is really love. How many of us are willing to admit that we just don't love ourselves enough? We think we do. We try, but we really don't. Many of us really don't love ourselves enough. And that's my New Year's resolution. I'm going to love myself more this year and next year and the year after, in this whole new millennium, as long as I'm around. After writing All of Me, I truly understand that this struggle is not about my weight. It is about my love. It's about my love for me just the way I am. And I want to wrap up my presentation with a final journal entry from Serpentine called Soul Food. Wouldn't it be nice to eat like they did in that movie Soul Food and still look like Vanessa Williams, Vivica Fox, and Nia Long? Let the church say amen. Amen. Thank you.
You know, it was an excellent presentation. I have never been to a reading, and so just coming tonight, you know, it made it interesting.
For the presentation, it gave insight into what made her write the book, issues with weight. She put a lot of research into that, so she truly understands and knows the struggles that women go through with weight. So I thought it was very insightful.
The 5 points she said for her New Year's resolution, and a lot of those, I'm going to do the same, concentrate on those things too, because I know I try to be a superwoman and can't do it all.
Venise Berry is about to blow up.